Charting Toward Intimacy covers mature topics. Listener discretion is advised. Charting Toward Intimacy covers mature topics. Listener discretion is advised. Hey there, welcome to Charting Toward Intimacy, where we're expanding the natural family planning conversation. I'm your host, Ellen Holloway. All right, so we are back with Tricia. Last week, Tricia shared her story with us, her kind of journey with NFP and infertility. And so this episode is kind of a follow-up to that. I'm going to be asking Tricia some questions about, how she felt during the process, and also just kind of the different ways that God has had his hands just all throughout this whole process, and how he just fit things perfectly into where they were. So I have a feeling that this episode may not make very much sense if you haven't listened to the episode prior and kind of know the background of Tricia's story. So if you're listening to this episode and you haven't listened to the episode right before this, please pause this episode, go back one, listen to Tricia's story, and then come back to this episode. All right. Well, welcome back, Tricia.
Thank you.
All right. So to start out, how did it feel to kind of first realize that you needed to seek out fertility help?
Yeah. Well, I felt surprised because, like I mentioned previously, I thought that it would be easy because we had done NFP so long to avoid. I thought getting pregnant, because I already knew my cycles and my windows, would just be like flipping a switch. But so I was really surprised. And also, we were relatively like young and we were healthy, and we didn't have any underlying health conditions. And so I just was kind of like, what's going on here? I didn't have anyone in my family who had infertility. So I had really no reason to suspect that we would have any infertility issues going into when we first decided to try to conceive. And so even making the appointment for the doctor, I still felt like, I don't think they're going to find anything. Maybe this is just like a timing issue. So I felt really surprised. And then once we learned that it actually was something real, something serious, something health related, I felt scared. I felt devastated, and I felt not right away, but later I felt angry, especially too with the NFP. I felt like, okay, God, like, what is going on here? Like, I have done it your way for all these years. Like, you can't just like make it easy for me to get pregnant, which is obviously not how it works. Our relationship with God is not transactional, but I felt like, I really went into NFP like not wanting to do it, but I did it. And so this doesn't feel very like I'm getting a reward or anything. I could have like taken the easy way out, or I guess I don't want to say the easy way out. I mean, I could have. NFP can be difficult. It's like, how am I trying to say what I'm trying to say? NFP can be hard, and there are other things you can do so that you can have what you want when you want it.
Right.
But we weren't doing that. And so I felt a little bit like, hey man, what's going on? I thought that, this should be easy if we're doing NFP to get pregnant. And so I had a lot of feelings. I felt surprised. I felt a lot of fear, very scared, devastated, sad.
Yeah. Well, I think
confused.
too, one of the things that you had mentioned to me, before we recorded the episodes, was that like when you started looking into the options that you had, you felt really abandoned by the church because you hadn't learned about NAPO yet.
Yes.
And so like the only things that you knew about because of, mainstream media and culture, which would be IUI and IVF, the church has hard no's on those. And so it just like, it was very devastating to not find the answer, that luckily you eventually found.
Yes. There was definitely a point where I felt abandoned because I felt like I'm looking to the church to tell me what to do, and I'm just being told what not to do. And I kind of wish that and maybe on some like church websites or wherever, that maybe this information is presented hand in hand. But when you're just like looking at the the church's teachings, or you're just Googling, like, what is the church teaching on IUI? What is the church teaching on IVF? You're not getting an answer that says the teaching is XYZ, but the church, gives you an alternative.
Yeah, here's the alternative. Here's what the church does support. Yeah. So if any of you
Yeah.
guys are listening and you talk about, or maybe you have access to like a church website where it has info about, the church teaching on IUI and IVF, make sure that there is info about the alternatives on that as well. If you're telling people about IUI and IVF, talk about what the church does promote and approve, and that being, NAPRO and other restorative reproductive technologies.
Yeah. And maybe even have an infertility group like at your church. I don't know if
that'd be
most
fabulous.
churches have that. I don't know. I feel like I've never really seen it very often. And maybe that's just the area that I'm in, but
it's
I
rare.
just felt like, yeah. And that's really surprises me. Yeah.
It's unfortunate. Yeah. It's unfortunate that how rare it is, but yeah, if you're listening,
but it's needed. Yeah. It's needed.
Start one up at your church.
Yeah.
All right. So Tricia, what, so if we're kind of skipping ahead in your story a little bit, to the IUI procedure that you had, what kind of were your thoughts and feelings surrounding that procedure when you decided to get it, and when you were like, I guess, like during the procedure?
Yeah. So when we decided to do it, we didn't feel good that it was against church teaching. But like I had said before, we didn't know that we had any other options, and I'm not offering that as an excuse. I just want to explain like where we were at in our journey. We had felt some desperation, and like this was all we had on offer, and that it wasn't, that it was what it was, and we made a choice to pursue it anyway, and we take responsibility for that choice. And that's also kind of why I wanted to share my story, because I don't think it's like the traditional trajectory for most Catholics who are dealing with infertility. But I know that there have to be other Catholic women out there who maybe have like started on, I don't want to necessarily say like the wrong path, but started in a direction that maybe wasn't where your faith would have drawn you, but you got back, and so, but yeah, so we decided to do it. And, the first time nothing happened, and I don't know, now looking back on that, maybe God was trying to tell us, like, you're not going to need this, like, walk away. but we were like, no,
he probably was trying to tell that, but sometimes
Yeah.
God has to tell us things multiple times before we actually listen.
Yeah. So the first time, nothing happened, and that was just devastating. And then the second time, there was a part of us that felt hopeful and wishing that it would take, and that, we'll be pregnant. And then there was also a part of me that felt like, okay, this isn't really how I want this to happen. Like in my heart of hearts, this is kind of awkward that, my baby might be being conceived right now. And I'm like in a doctor's office, like laying on a table, and my husband's sitting next to me holding my hand. And that's not to say that babies conceived of IUI or IVF are not exceptionally wanted and beautiful and, a gift, but definitely, I did kind of feel like I just don't, this isn't really how I wanted this to happen. And so it did feel a little bit weird. And then I also felt like if I do get pregnant and then like we announce our pregnancy, do we have to like tell people that we did IUI? Like, is it somehow dishonest if we don't? Is that anybody's business? How will we explain this one day to our child if, or like, do we even need to? it kind of like just led me through to a lot of questions that I just didn't really have answers for, but I really pushed that aside because I just had a lot of desperation. It's really the only word. I felt so desperate for a baby, and I felt so scared that I might never have one. And at that point in my journey, that felt like the worst thing possible that could happen. So, we just did it anyway, but it didn't work.
it sounds like to me with some of the thoughts that you had like during the procedure is that you had a very natural and true understanding of a lot of what Saint Pope, I don't know what order you say it in, if it's Pope Saint or Saint Pope John Paul II wrote in Theology of the Body. And like you had that natural understanding that like something is off about conceiving a child outside of an act of intercourse. You just kind of knew. So Tricia, part of your story involved a prayer and healing service at your church. We didn't talk about it in the previous episode because we didn't have time. Can you kind of tell us a Cliff Notes version of that story?
Yes. So our parish had a healing service, and they had reconciliation, anointing with oil, and also you could go up for prayer with like the prayer teams. And so my husband and I went, and we did everything. But I went up for prayer alone because he's a little bit more shy and reserved. And I had asked him, do you want me to wait? And he said, no, you can go ahead and go on your own. And I felt okay with that. And so I went up to this couple and I told them my prayer intentions, and I told them a little bit of our background with our infertility. And like, I started crying, and basically like the whole night was beautiful. I basically like bawled the entire time. So beautiful. Like you could just feel like there's just so much healing there, and on all levels. And so, but I was crying, and I think it was her husband as a couple, but she prayed over me. They both prayed for us. And it felt so beautiful. And I went back and I sat down, and I was with my husband. At the end, we went to leave, and her name was Chris. And she came up to me, and I said, oh, this is my husband. And I said, this is Chris. She prayed for us in our infertility. And she said, while she was praying for me, she was reminded of a story of a family member of hers. And I don't have all the details quite right anymore, but it was either like her mother or her stepmom or somebody in her family had been wanting to have a child, but was struggling to conceive. And they had a St. Therese statue. And this family member of hers would pray the rosary with St. Therese, and then they would hang their rosary on the statue. And she remembers this growing up, and they eventually went on to have a child. And she said that my story made her think of that. And then she told me that a couple weeks prior, because she's a teacher at the school there at the church, an older parishioner had come to one of the kids' daily masses and came up to her and said, I don't know who this is for, but I think I'm supposed to give this to you, or I feel like I'm supposed to give this to you, or something along those lines. And it was a St. Therese statue. And so she had her sitting in her classroom this whole time wondering, what do I do with her? She just kind of was holding on to her. And so she said, I feel like I'm supposed to give her to you. Will you take her? And I said, yes, of course, And I had heard that people have these really amazing experiences with St. Therese. I had prayed that novena to her. That was like, I think a month prior. And so I thought, oh, maybe this is one of those things like where she's moving in a big way. I'm getting like a statue of her. Right. But I had never received like a flower or anything like how people say they do. And which is totally fine. You don't have to receive the flower to know that she's interceding for you. I'm just in my own experience. I just hadn't had that happen.
You just wanted flowers.
Yeah, exactly. So we bring her home, and I put her on my mantle, and I have my mother's rosary, and my mom died in 2012. And so I have her rosary, and I keep it in a little keepsake box. And I remembered Chris's story, and I thought, oh, I'm going to hang my mom's rosary on St. Therese. And so I hang my mother's rosary up. It's in front of the mantle. This is October 2019. January 1 of 2020, I asked my husband, do you want to go to adoration and say a rosary just to like set the tone for the year? Our adoration chapel was 24/7 at that time, and he was home, and he said, yeah. So I took I took my mother's rosary. I don't pray with that rosary often, but I decided to take it because it's special, and I have a special intention for the year. And we're sitting in adoration, and as I'm going through the rosary and I'm holding it, the light catches it like just right. And the middle piece that is usually like a depiction of Mary isn't. I thought it was Mary this whole time. And I realized that it's the same depiction of the statue I've been looking at for the last 2 months. And it's St. Therese in my mother's rosary. And I Googled,
there's your
like,
roses.
St. Therese. Yeah. Yes. Well, the beads had little roses like
Oh my gosh, of
etched
course they
like
did.
with gold, but they had faded off because my mom had used this rosary so much that it was faded. And so was the depiction of Saint Therese. Like the metal was a little bit flatter than like maybe it
Uh-huh.
normally is. And so I never realized it, one, because I never knew who Saint Therese was really before this. And two, because I just assumed it was Mary and I never looked that closely. And so then I was like, okay, whoa, girl, like she is showing up for us. That was like a utterly miraculous to me that a stranger at my church would give me a Saint Therese statue and my mother's rosary from, that I had from 8 years prior, like for 8 years now, because she had passed, that and then I hung it up on her and then found out months later that it was Saint Therese. Is just like it just blows my mind. And I just like to think of my mom and Saint Therese like just like laughing at me because I had her rosary, a Saint Therese rosary on Saint Therese for months and I had no idea. But that was a really big moment in our journey. I felt like the saints really had my back. I felt like God was like was with us, was hearing us. And that was a moment that I went back to a lot. After that time, when I'd have moments of despair or fear, I would think back to that because I just kept feeling like that cannot be for nothing. That can't be for nothing. That
Yeah.
is too big. It's too big. So yes, that was a really amazing and beautiful moment. And I was eventually able to get back in touch with Chris and tell her that, remind her, like, I don't, that I went to this mass and you gave me the statue and we did have a child, like,
Oh, yeah.
just like you prayed for with us. And that was like a really beautiful moment too.
Yeah, definitely. So, you also said that your therapist really ignited your faith again. Can you tell us just a little bit, kind of some of the ways that she helped you reignite your faith?
Yeah. So, one of the big ways that she did that was she really encouraged me to journal. I just want to say though that I'm not like the biggest journaler if I'm not going through something. Like when things are pretty like, level, it's kind of like, but my mom used to journal a lot. And so that resonated to me when she suggested, journaling. And I was kind of like, oh, I don't know. But she suggested something very specific, which at first I was definitely like, this seems kind of weird, but I'm going to try it. And she recommended journaling letters and starting them with Dear Jesus, and then like writing a letter and writing my feelings to Jesus, and having that prayer be presented in that way. And that really helped me work through a lot of my feelings. It helped me really face a lot of my feelings that I was having, because I was having a lot of anger towards God. I was having a lot of questioning of my faith. I was feeling a lot of despair, a lot of desolation. I was feeling like alone or like cast off, like I'm calling out to you, I'm crying out to you, I'm suffering. And like, I don't feel anything. I'm not getting an answer. Like I felt like there was a wall. And I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure I remember saying that to her. Like, I feel like there's a wall, like, and I'm trying to get through to the other side. Like, I know God's there, but I don't feel anything. And that's making this even harder. And I think that wall was just me and my own feelings. And I wasn't being straight with my feelings to God, because like, you don't want to go to God. You should. If you're mad, he knows. Okay. You're not hiding anything from him. He already knows. And you're allowed to have your feelings and to pour them out to God, whatever they are. And so she really gave me the permission to do that. And she gave me the tool to do that through the journaling and through the Dear Jesus format. She also really encouraged me to reach out to the saints. This wasn't something that I had been doing previously in my prayer life. And she really, she encouraged me to look up some saints, research the saints, find one that I feel connected to or that resonates with me, which encouraged me to pray novenas to the saints, which is really powerful and a really beautiful thing to do when you're really struggling with something. And so that was another big thing. And just her own Catholic experience too. And like she did share parts of that with me during my own journey, and just how validating that was. And seeing somebody kind of on the other side of that was really hopeful for me. And those things just led to more things. Like doing all those things led me to the Catholic podcasts that taught me so much that I didn't know. We started going back to mass more regularly, and I started going to adoration a lot more. And the adoration chapel, I wish it was still 24/7. They changed it, but that's okay. Like, but at the time it was 24/7. And you know what? It's like, if I got my period and I was devastated, I was there. Like, that became my place to go and just like pour out my feelings, or to just be with God and have that time. And so that was another really powerful thing too. And she had encouraged that as well.
Awesome. So we already talked about Saint Therese a little bit, but you have another special saint friend that I doubt many of our listeners know. Can you tell us a little bit about how he interceded for you and your husband?
Yes. So that saint is Saint Charbel. He was a Maronite monk in the 1800s in Lebanon. And I remember seeing an article posted about him during his feast day, which was in July. So it was sort of right after I started seeing her, and she was like, find a saint. And then he like popped up, and I was like, oh. And I remembered really liking him because in the article that I read about him, it talked about how Christians, Catholics, and Muslims alike had received miracles through his intercession. And my BFF, who has really supported me through all of this as well, she's Muslim. And so I felt like, that made me, I felt really connected to that part of his history and his story. And so we found a novena and we started praying to him. I also discovered that the only St. Charbel shrine in the United States is in Phoenix, Arizona, I think Phoenix or like the Scottsdale area. My in-laws and my sister-in-law live in Arizona. But there's a St. Joseph Maronite church out there that has his shrine, and they do healing masses every month. So if you're in Arizona and you're looking for healing of any kind, you should definitely check that out. But you can make a donation. If you make a donation to the church on their website, any amount, they will send you a small bottle of St. Charbel, like holy oil that you can use at home for for healing anointing on your own and in your own prayer life. And so we received some holy oil, and my husband used to anoint me with it, which was really beautiful. And my sister-in-law, she went to a healing mass on our behalf in January of 2020. And then my son was born in January of 2021. So yeah, there's no coincidence there. And we had been praying the novena, the St. Charbel novena, for healing for my husband when we were waiting to learn the results of his analysis after having done the surgical repair a year prior. And so we definitely felt like St. Charbel came through in a big way for us in a miracle with his sperm counts being normal.
Yeah. Oh, fabulous. So, skipping way ahead to when the doctor told you that you had a 70 to 80% chance of conceiving naturally. There was still a couple of cycles before you got pregnant. I think you said there were, it was on the 6th cycle after he told you that you got pregnant. So how did that time, those 5 cycles, 5.5 cycles before you found out you were pregnant, how did that feel? And how did it compare to other periods of time through your journey?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So on the one hand, there was more hope, definitely. The doctor saying you have a 70, I think you have a 70 to 80% chance. That was something I could go back to a lot and recall and remember, okay, it didn't happen this time, but he said, we have a really good chance. We just have to keep trying. But at the same time, there was almost like more devastation in some way, which I hate to say that because I feel like that doesn't sound very encouraging, but there's a reason for it. because you had to wait till day 17 and my luteal phases were always short. So like so I started having 14, 15, 16-day luteal phases. So maybe the first cycle, it went to like day 15. And then the next couple, it went to day 16. And then, it's day 16 and it's 11 p.m. at night. And I'm thinking, oh, this is it. And then I get my period at 11 o'clock at night.
Devastating.
And that was crushing. That was crushing. I had never made it that far. And so I thought, oh, like it's happening. It's finally happening. And that was really, really crushing. So, and it also felt like, okay, we know what the problem is. We're treating it and it's still not working. And so there was that fear of, well, what if this doesn't work? What if we're treating it and it still doesn't work? What does that mean? What do we do next? What if we run out of options? So, for me, I think for a lot of people, but especially I felt like for me, infertility, it really brought like a lot of fear of the unknown, of just never knowing if it was going to happen or not. But looking back on it now, I definitely feel like there were just a lot of things that happened where, God was giving us these little miracles along the way to keep us encouraged, to keep us moving forward. And to remind us that this was going to happen. You couldn't see it at the time because it's not happening. And so you're afraid it's never going to happen, but I can see it now. But yeah, so those cycles, they were definitely more hopeful because it felt more proactive. Like, okay, we're actually doing something. I am physically doing something. I'm physically injecting my abdomen with this medication,
right,
to do something to make this happen. And that felt empowering and a lot better than the previous cycles where it's like, well, we don't know what's going on. We don't know what his sperm count is like anymore. We're just sort of seeing what happens and having like that flicker of hope get extinguished over and over and over again. This felt like, okay, it didn't happen this time, but we know we can try this again. And the doctor had told us to, it could take some cycles. I'm okay with you going, 6 to 8 to 9 cycles of HCG, before we try something different. And so yeah, so it was a mixed bag. There was some hope, but it was still very devastating, and especially devastating that one that would happen late at night. I felt like I was so close. That one was really hard.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for just sharing that honest, thought process, because I think some people listening that are maybe in a similar situation or have felt similarly, or who knows, maybe in the future they will be in a similar situation. They can look back on that and say, I'm not alone. I had those same feelings that Tricia had. You guys can be friends.
You are not alone. Yeah. Yes.
All right. My last question that I have for you, Tricia, is how did it feel to read that positive pregnancy test finally?
I was in shock. I always imagined, when I get that test, and it's positive, I'm going to cry. I'm going to scream. I'm going to jump for joy. Like I really imagined, and I truly thought that I would have this like insanely emotional reaction. And to be super honest, I didn't. I don't even think I cried about it for months until I like really got deep into my pregnancy. And then it felt really real. Seeing it felt that had been negative. And I think too, like I said, we were 3 years into our infertility journey. And even though I had more options through NAPRO to still explore, there was a part of me in my heart where I was starting to ask the question, did I misinterpret what I thought was God telling us we were going to have children? Did that maybe mean something else? Are we being told that we're not going to have children? What will my life look like if we're childless? What does that mean for me? How do I begin to heal through that? Is adoption something we would consider? These are all questions that I had in my mind and that I had been more removed from, but I was starting to get closer to, because as our journey went longer and longer, eventually a decision would have to be made. okay, we're going to stop intervening. We're going to stop trying. And when that would be, I don't know. I'll never know because we didn't end up getting to that point. But I did feel each cycle like we were getting a little bit closer. And so I had really started to contemplate what that would mean, and explore that in my own heart, my own mind, and my own prayer life. And while simultaneously still hoping, still trying, still praying that we would have a child. So when it finally happened, I was really in this weird, like in between of, okay, I think a miracle of having a baby could happen, but if it doesn't, I need to start preparing for what that will mean for me.
Yeah.
And so then to see like that it is happening, it just was very surreal. I was very shocked. I definitely felt so happy. But I never cried. I didn't cry, which really shocked me. I thought for sure I'm going to bawl my eyes out when I finally see that pregnancy test. And I didn't. I just really was walking around like almost like in a fog. Like I can't even believe that this is happening. And sometimes I feel like I still feel that way a little bit. Like I look at my son and I think, I can't believe you're here.
Yeah.
And sometimes I tell him the story of like how long we waited for. I mean, he doesn't understand yet. He's 10 months old, but I'll look at him and I'll say, we waited for you for so long. We love you so much. I'm so glad you're here. Like, I can't believe you're here. I can't believe I'm your mom. Like, I can't believe I'm a mother. Like, it's still like amazing to me, I think, because it was so long.
I have 2 kids now and I still don't believe I'm a mother sometimes. So yeah, you are not alone in that.
Yeah. I think it's amazing no matter how you come to it.
Yeah.
But I will say that I do think our infertility struggle has really colored my experience of motherhood differently. It's still super hard. It's still the hardest, most wonderful thing I've ever done. But I do have so much gratitude. So much. And I think we all have gratitude for our children. I don't mean it to sound like I'm more grateful than like somebody else is, but it's a gratitude in a different way. And I'm also very grateful for the spiritual journey that it brought me, in the spiritual place that it brought me to. And so when I look back on it, I would never wish for someone to go through this. And I wish I didn't have to go through it, but I would never take it back because it changed my life for the better.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And I think that's a really great place for us to end our conversation. Tricia, thank you so much for sharing your story. And then for just having a chat just now with me kind of about some of the finer points of your journey and the friends that helped you along the way, the saintly friends.
Yeah.
Well, and the ones on earth too, but
yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for just talking with me and giving me a chance to share my experience. I hope that it is helpful for anyone listening.
Thanks so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed listening and hearing some of the things that Tricia was going through, some of the things that she was thinking and feeling through this whole journey with infertility. That is why we wanted to follow up her story with this episode that dived in a little bit more into the thoughts and feelings that went alongside the things that she was met with throughout this entire journey. If you're someone who is struggling with those church teachings on, reproductive health care, or if you're just needing someone to talk to about some of these things, I do offer coaching, one-on-one coaching experiences. So be sure to check out the show notes for how to book with me. And again, if you're not following us on Instagram, be sure to follow us at Charting Toward Intimacy. And if you have any questions, concerns, or podcast episode topic ideas, send me an email or reach out to me on Instagram. Links to those are in the show notes. Until next time.